Hello, everybody, and welcome to another rowing chat. This is a very special interview. For the first time ever, I'm joined by other hosts of other rowing chat, and their podcast is called Rowing in Colour. We'll come to that in a minute, but first, a brief word from our sponsors. William Marnie are shirt makers who help make shirts for athletic men. These are dress shirts with collars, and their designs are specifically for people whose arms and backs are more muscle perhaps than the average. They have a range which has been designed from the base up for fit and athletic men. And you can find out more and get a 10% discount coupon at rowing.chat/sponsor. And we would really appreciate it if you click through and take a look at that for yourself or for a friend or a partner. Blake Gourlay is a host on the Strength Coach Roundtable, and he has written a book called The Movement of Rowing, which explains how movement limitations in your foot and your ankle affect your performance, your technique, and your health. The book is backed with a load of self-screening strategies, so you can find out if you are compromised in this area, and it will help you as a coach or a rower how to reach your full potential. You can get the ebook with 30% off with a promo code RowingChat. Follow the link again from our sponsors page. Now, Rowing Chat is also doing a listener survey. We'd love to know from you what we do well and what you like and what you perhaps don't like quite so much about what we do. If you go to our homepage, there is a link at the bottom of the page that says listener survey, and we would love to get your feedback. That's going to be open through till the end of May, and then I'm going to close it off. Now, let me welcome my guests today from the Rowing in Colour podcast. Welcome, Denise. Welcome, Patricia.
Thanks so much for having us.
Hey.
It's great, and we were laughing just before we started recording how it's weird for you to be the interviewee for once.
Yeah, now we know what our guests feel like. But we're so happy to be here.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in rowing. Patricia, you go first.
So I've been rowing for about 7 years. Such a long time. 7 years, and I first originally started in high school, 9th grade. And it was kind of one of those try a new sport, just go try a new sport when you join high school. And I joined this team, and I've just been rowing ever since. Then from 4 years into high school, I was like, I can't get enough of it, but I don't want to row competitively in college. So I decided to start coaching. So I've been coaching for the last about 5 years-ish, on and off. So yeah, I've been coaching for a while now. Yeah.
Fantastic. Denise, what's your story?
So I've been a part of the rowing world for just a little bit longer, about under 15 years. I joined the crew team in college, and I remember I told the first time I was on the erg, I told myself, all right, I'll do this for a month, and we'll see. We'll see if I stick with it. After a month, I kept saying to myself, oh gosh, I'm gonna quit. I can't stand it. But I didn't. Obviously, I started out as a rower. I was incredibly stubborn. I'm only 5 feet tall. I was incredibly stubborn, and I don't think if it wasn't for my novice coach, Karen Murphy, who's Irish, by the way, and I don't think if it wasn't for her, I would have stuck with it. And I rowed my first semester, but then I gave in to my, height and coxed the other 7 semesters. But then after that, I just couldn't quit. So I coached again for 3 years at where I went to school, which is Binghamton. And once you start coaching, you kind of don't stop. So I coached in Anchorage for Anchorage Rowing Association.
Wow.
Yeah, which was very. Oh my. Thankfully, I was in the summer, so the water was liquid. there were moose in the lake. You could see the bottom of the lake. The lake also was a runway for float planes. So not only did I have to look for watercraft, but I also had to look for planes landing. And that was the first time I coached middle school too. So that was a whole big learning experience into itself. So I went from coaching in Anchorage for 2 summers to then going back to New York, where I'm from, to coaching at Harlem River Community Rowing, which, you know, I just keep going on the most busy waterways. And then I've been at Row New York for the last 7 years, where I've been working with our youth populations, our people with disabilities, our veterans, doing our National Learn to Row Day and our events. And it's been nonstop, but 14 years, that's my background.
Well, congratulations to both of you, and how lovely to find people who are just as enthusiastic as I am. Now, you just started a brand new podcast this year called Rowing in Colour. Why did you start the podcast?
Well, the idea was mine, and it kind of spawned from a conversation I had with Arshay last year, Arshay Cooper, and we were talking about, you know, where's the space that we can have for people of color to talk about rowing and talk about their experiences, and we threw some ideas around. We threw like conferences, we threw video, we threw a lot of ideas around, and podcasting really stuck out to me, partly because of my personal experience with like audio engineering and audio, just editing altogether. I did have some rudimentary experience in college with Pro Tools and Apple Logic, so having that basic, very, very, very basic skill set, it's not anything to brag about, having that very basic skill set, plus this passion, and then plus the 2020 New Year's resolution, it all kind of fell together. And I mean, Arshay is a great person. However, I think that once I reached out to Patricia and I said, Patricia, I finally got the title. I finally got the logo. Will you do this with me? And within 3 seconds, she said, yep, I'm down. So she's been the best decision I've made in all of this. So she's as much a part of this and as much credit for this as I am. So that's why we started how we started. And
you have a fan watching live from Denise. Hi, Denise. You're everywhere.
That's funny because we're social distancing. So oh my gosh, I'm getting red now.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Anyway, so the New Year's resolution happened, and obviously, Patricia, you were on a fast learning curve, I'm guessing.
Yeah, very much so.
You've explained that the podcast is about people of color who are into rowing. So it's like a coincidence of two things. What are the issues that you decided when you started it that you wanted to highlight so that you had something to talk about when you're live?
So it started off very like sporadic. It was everywhere. It was like, okay, well, let's kind of give the interviewee the chance just to talk about themselves. And then I think by like our third person, we were just like, we need to set ground rules. And so one of them was just the success. People like tell your success. Be able to say like what did you do so well in rowing. It doesn't matter where it was, if you won the Olympics or to your hometown regatta, being able to share that. Then it was confronting the unequal treatment that people of color have dealt with in rowing, and how people of color have gone about dealing with it. So it kind of bounced from like, here's your success, but now tell us the hardship that you've gone through. And from there, people just flow and just tell a lot of their stories about what they've gone through.
That's a fabulous way to do it, isn't it? Because as you've worked out with podcasting, it really helps to have a theme to follow. And of course, anyone listening, it's lovely to hear stories of success, but you actually want to know how they got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell us a little bit about the guests that you've had on the show so far, because you've already name-checked Arshay, who I don't personally know, but I have shaken his hand once. He probably wouldn't remember. Who else have you had talk to you?
Yeah, as I could casually name drop Arshay. um, so we've had a lot of folks on the show. Our very first guest, and this again, like I've been working with people with disabilities for 3 years, 3 years and counting. Sorry, 3 years and counting. And I felt very strongly about our first guest being someone with a disability and a person of color. So Dwayne Adams is the executive director of Breaking Barriers, and he's our very first episode. And we started with Dwayne, and it all stemmed from there. Since then, we've interviewed folks like Daphne Marchenko, the first African American to row in the boat race, first person of color to row in the boat race, Maurice Scott, Sharika Ukogu, the first Nigerian Olympic rower, Arshay, and so many people. Even folks who, folks, you don't have to be an Olympian, you don't have to be the first something to be great in rowing. And one person that we that we featured on our podcast, she started her school's rowing club at the age of 14, and she is still in high school and still the only person of color on her rowing team to this day. And so we've kind of gotten her to help us interview other guests who are also in high school. And aside from the folks I just mentioned, we've interviewed now about 30 folks, and we only have 12 episodes published, so we're quite ahead of schedule. That means I'm backed up. But it also means that a lot of people are talking. A lot of people want to hear the stories, and our most popular episode actually features people who are anonymous. And that episode is "What's One Thing You Want Your White Coach to Know?" And week after week, it's been our most popular episode, even though it's an older episode by now. And the folks who we don't know their names, they're the ones whose stories are listened to the most. So even though some of our guests are names and are, Olympians, are national team rowers, we do have guests just like me and Patricia who are doing the work at the boathouse day in, day out. And everyone might have not heard of us, but they might. And through this podcast, we hope that we are able to amplify the stories of those who people might not always hear about.
I love the concept of the anonymous contributor. So these people recorded their thoughts and sent them to you?
Yes. Yeah.
I noticed it said part 1 on that episode. Does that mean you have more?
Yeah. We already got the next stories for part 2. And Patricia and I, we have a plan. We're gonna make it a surprise, because we're gonna just try to keep topping what we do and make sure our listeners get as much as we can give them. But we have a way to deliver that in a way that that kind of just bumps the ante even more.
Bumps the eddy. That's a new phrase for me. I'm going to borrow
I could have made it up. I don't know.
Everyone's rode through eddies. When you are talking, both your named guests and the anonymous ones, are there common themes that come through around those ground rules that Patricia, you told us about earlier?
Yeah, there's definitely always a common theme that we find. Usually it's not knowing how to vocalize to people of color, not knowing how to vocalize to people who are white, or they fear backlash a lot of times for their opinions. And so it's a lot easier for them to be able to get on here on our podcast and just kind of talk about it as like from one person of color to another person of color, and not fear any backlash or any retribution. And so that's one of the major themes. A lot of times the theme is just sharing their message. A lot of times it's kind of like, well, this is my story. This is what I went through. And I just want someone who, from the next generation, a lot of times it's the message being shared to the next generation, and letting them know, like, this is what I went through, and you may not have to go through exactly these steps, but if you follow if you've gone through something similar, here's how I got through it, and here's how you can get through it. And so a lot of times the message is not to anyone particular, but more likely to someone who is younger and might be going into the rowing world, not knowing what to expect.
That's a great example. And I know you're really active on Instagram, which of course is a great place to hang out with young people, which is super. Can you give me an example from your own personal rowing experience? I mean, I am guessing that you have been through this yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I've gone through, I think there's small incidents in my life I can remember while rowing. I think one of the smaller ones is when you go to regatta. Maybe it's like I said, maybe it's just an American thing. When you go to regatta, you kind of there's a routine, you get to the hotel, you drop off your luggage, you might go to dinner. Dinner's usually in a mall. So cause in like a food area. And I remember always with my fellow teammates who were of color, always getting dressed. Like we got to the hotel, we showered. We were always very clear about getting dressed, particularly so no one could question our status. It was just such a weird way to think about it when you're, as an adult now, as thinking about me at 14, 15, thinking about these things. But we always got dressed very particularly so we looked like we were going out to eat, and that but our fellow teammates were white. They would just walk out. They would drop their luggage, and we were in car rides for 3-4 hours depending on where we were going, and they didn't care about the shower or their appearance. They kind of were like, yeah, I'm in shorts and a crop top, let's go to the mall, we're gonna go have dinner. And so I remember feeling that I'm on the rowing team and we didn't fit the image of a rowing team. Or we didn't think we felt fit into that image because everyone else was there and there were plenty of people who were at regattas that weekend. So we were all at the same mall, or at the same looking at them, they all look and fit the mold. And we were just like, why don't we feel like we fit the mold? And remember having to talk to our coaches a lot and get that reassurance of this is your spot. This is your place in this world because you've earned it. Because you've got into the boat every day for practice and you train for it. So I remember these conversations so vividly. And this is maybe 7 years ago. But these are very clear incidents where I'm rowing didn't make me feel comfortable for a while. And it was such a small incident in my life that it still holds me. So even now as a coach, I see my kids, I'm just like, guys, be careful when you go out. Just make sure you are presenting yourself appropriately so no one questions your status.
That's a great example. And so you said that obviously you felt uncertain. What was the thing that eventually led you to feel confident and that you did fit the mold? Because you're still here in the sport, which is big thumbs up. So something must have changed.
I think it was just, for me, it was definitely getting my white teammates, to understand that feeling that we felt when we went out into public, or how we felt on the regatta course, of being that team that had the most kids who were of color. Once I think my teammates understood that struggle or that feeling, that that butterfly in our stomach, that what didn't have to do with us racing, but us being there in general, I think I felt so much more comfortable because I knew that I had the support of people who fit into who seem to fit into the mold, and they believe that I should be here. And I'm like, if you guys are my teammates and you sat there and you've gone through the struggles with me through training, and you say I should be here, and I feel like I'm starting to feel like I should be here, I see myself here, I can imagine myself in this boat. And then also it definitely has to do with winning. When you sit in that boat and and you go to the finish line and you win, it's like, yeah, I belong here. I beat all your boats. This is my place. This is my position in life.
Did you persuade your white teammates to dress up for dinner?
No, that never really happened. That never changed. I think we got more comfortable and dressed down, actually, which is interesting. So we found our balance, but they never dressed up.
That's interesting. And Denise, do you have a particular example you could share from your own experience? Obviously very different because you were coming in more as a coxswain. And I think, am I right, you're Native American?
No. I know. No, everyone in Alaska made that misconception, which I kind of, they kept asking me if I wanted the native discount, and I said okay, but then I realized no, I shouldn't take that discount. I know. So I did know before that I wasn't Native American, but that's okay. It's a common misconception.
All right.
No, it's all right. I'm only red because I'm nervous. I'm Filipino American.
Wonderful. So back to the question, from your own history as an athlete, and tell us a little bit about something that we can begin, for me, awareness of the issue and then recognizing where an issue might arise is the first step towards helping make an improvement. So can you share something that's a little different than Patricia's story?
Yeah, sure. So I think I've spent more years coaching, putting a boat out on the water, pushing a boat off at a regatta than I have actually being in the boat that's in the race. And having as many years of experience in that, what comes to mind is not being seen as a coach. And another one of our guests also mentioned a similar story like this, where you'd put on the stopwatch, you'd put on the hat, you'd put on the vest, is it a Patagonia vest? All right, let me get that. Is it like rain boots? All right, let me put those on. Like, what does a coach look like? So that way the referees stop mistaking me for a rower, a child, a coxswain, any person who shouldn't be there. And I've heard other people say this story as well. And for me, I know that I've had so many experiences, and I look through older photos of myself. I can tell when I'm dressed as a coach, because like I don't love vests, but I'll wear it if that's what the masses are wearing in terms of like coaches, I don't really use my stopwatch so much anymore, but I would put it on so people might assume based on what I'm wearing that I am a coach at a race. And so I think for folks to, I guess, not assume any different, and that if someone is here, they are supposed to be here. They weren't off jogging one day and like accidentally came to a regatta and decided to push their boat off the dock. That's not how it goes, And I know very well, I mean, I'm only 5 feet tall. I get it. It's easy to overlook me, but for every 8 rowers, there's someone who's 5 feet tall, So in terms of feeling invisible, I think that's something that especially, and maybe like a lot of other Asian Americans feel as well. And I hope that, just increasing the visibility in general of people of color, increasing the visibility of Asian Americans. And also, a theme that's come up, I know we didn't talk about this before, but a theme that's come up is integration versus assimilation. Are we as people of color going to act whitewashed just to fit in, just to be accepted? Or are we going to hold on to what, like the lumpia and pancit that our parents brought for the regatta tent, are we going to hold on to like the rice and like all the things that our parents want to bring, or tell them, nah, can you please bring like brownies or something that people are going to recognize? And so the themes of integration and assimilation do come up. And we do have ideas for how to implement that in future episodes. But I think especially as what's happening in America right now with the riots in Minnesota and the riots in LA and the context of police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think especially as a non-Black person of color, I think it's important for people like me to recognize and address any privileges that we have, so that way we're not forgetting about our fellow people of color. We're not treating Black people the way that any differently than we would treat our own people, and making sure that any unchecked anti-Blackness does go checked and does get fixed. I don't fixed is not the right word, but I think at least it being addressed is really important, because you can still be a person of color and still be racist.
Good point. Patricia, do you have something to add?
No, I think she hit all the right points. I think it's just so hard. Like as a cop, when she's saying that story, I said this at the last interview, hearing and remembering as a coach now, going on to at a regatta and having someone tell me that this is not my space, because I look too young and I have baby face. I know I should
enjoy it while it lasts, honey.
I think like I get it. I'm young. I look young, but like when you have a team that is obviously looking at you for direction and for guidance, I think you as an official should just kind of like put the pieces together and go, this person must be a coach. And so when you then go, are you a coach? Are you sure you belong here? It's just like, no, I just decided to stand on the dock today. Like it was just a beautiful day. I picked up some gear on the way. So I do completely agree where it's a lot of times it's understanding how to make sure you leave your foot there, like you put your foot down and kind of go, this is my space and I'm okay with it, and you need to accept me with here. Like I don't need to make any changes to fit into your box. You need to come and we need to meet in the middle.
That's a very good way of putting it. I like the meeting in the middle concept. So I'm obviously a bit older than you, but even in my rowing lifetime, I started rowing at university when I was 19, and we were the first women in a college that had previously been men only. Having said that, the guys were just fascinated by us. We had the captain of boats teach us as the beginners. But I later then joined a rowing club in London that was previously, it was already mixed when I joined, but the members who had been the very first women to join the club, when they joined in the late 70s, the club insisted that women joining the club had to be of national team standard, but men could come as novices. And so it took a while for them to, erode and come to that, as Patricia said, that mid place where you can meet in the middle. By the time I got there, it was a completely normal club with, men and women, beginners, experienced, whatever. But it's clear to me that change has happened so substantially, even in my own lifetime in the sport of rowing. And I had no history in the sport. I didn't go to a school a high school that rowed. My family weren't rowers. So, it was kind of totally new for everyone. And my parents didn't ever really come to regattas. Like my mum watched me row once in the boat race, and then a second time when I actually won a medal much later on in my rowing career. I was like, and I was just like, I had to learn to accept it. But then, other people, like their parents are there every day, like you say, and they've got the box of brownies or the food or the, whatever it is. And there's like, yeah, this is interesting. Different people are quite different,
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to where I'm really keen to hear your insights, which is actions to improve. So Patricia's given us a view of two different situations. And if I can categorize what you've said, which is you create awareness of a different perception between the two parties, and then you try and meet in the middle. You've obviously not only lived it, but you're also helping us to understand this through the interviewees that you've got in the Rowing in Colour podcast. What are the actions that anyone who's listening today could take?
I mean, the first step is to always speak out. It's the hardest step. It sounds so easy, just speak out. It's the hardest step, but the first step is to say something to the person you feel, or to the group of people you feel that are causing you the injustice. The second step is to step up and start implicating your own change. That could mean you getting a group of people who come from different backgrounds and getting together and showing that a group of individuals from different backgrounds still can row and still can be successful in rowing. We don't all need to come from a white privileged background or come from, the elite team to be successful. We can come from everywhere and still put a boat together. I think it's also one of the biggest things I think we had an interviewee say was sitting down with her team and her coaches, and with that foundation was and just kind of get them to agree that there are some issues and they need to fix it, but they need to fix it as a team. She can't just give all the solutions because she is a woman of color, but she needs the same support from all her staff and all for her rowers, to kind of get her to get the team to be an open, inclusive team even after they are long gone. And so it's pretty much saying something to begin with, because not always do people notice that there is an unequal balance. Sometimes it's such a small thing. Yeah, it could be so simple as, when guys getting to be put in a boat over more girls, and that, like, that doesn't, no one notices it because it might not be a big issue, because they're like, well, we have 4 girls and we have an 8 of boys, why should we mix boats? Something simple like that. But it's like, what if you have these strong girls and you're not giving them the chance to be put in a quad or the chance to stroke a boat, or let's say I have this African-American girl who's from the inner city, but then she joins a team at a private school, and little things like that. And she doesn't have the funds to, mom and family doesn't have the funds to be at the regattas, bring the food to the tents, drive, do the carpools, do you leave that child behind because they don't have that foundation to begin with? Everything has to be done as a team. And these are a lot of the examples that I have always thought about throughout my life, but we've had so many interviewees just consistently say these same rules to us. Like, I had to speak up. I had to talk to my team and my coaching staff. I had to implicate things myself by having, by stepping up and saying, this is what we need to start doing on this team. This is what the next generation needs. And this is what we're going to do so we can be the successful team, that diverse team that US Rowing and the world is looking at.
That's a lovely way to put it, because, of course, teamwork comes naturally to people who are into rowing. We know that once we've been picked, or even just for this outing, we're all in the crew together and it's us versus the rest of the world, even if tomorrow, you might be in a different lineup. So do you think that mentality in the sport of rowing actually is very conducive to your team problem solving?
Yeah, I actually do. I think most teams are very open to the idea. Like, if you say that there's an issue, I think most teammates will be like, okay, let's figure it out. Because if there is any tension, anyone who's rowed, who's been in a boat, if there's a slight tension between 2 seats, it's sensed throughout the boat. Usually it's sensed throughout the team. The strokes just doesn't connect. So if there's an issue within a group of people on a team, it's just not going to flow in general. Any boat lineup you put out is always going to come back a little bit more funky than the next, until you solve that issue that is holding everyone back mentally.
That's a really good point. And of course, Denise, you mentioned earlier isms. As you were talking, it brought to mind, I watched the movie of Harvey Milk, who was an early gay rights campaigner in San Francisco. And the fundamental truth at the heart of his campaign was, firstly, for normal people who thought that they didn't know anyone who was gay, to find that actually there were people already in their circle of acquaintance who identified as gay. And then that led to breaking down the barriers between people realizing that actually there was a very substantial number of people who they were already acquainted with or friendly with, or was their teacher or their pupil or a co-worker who was gay, and therefore gays were kind of normal in the normal span of people. And so your first step, speak out, is exactly the thing, I think I'm right in saying, that they did in order to improve that situation.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And I think what you're saying also with the example of Harvey Milk also resonates, because I think it's hard to keep track of the dates in quarantine, but we are approaching Pride Month. So I think that like ism upon ism, we really just need to not only speak out, but also listen to the stories, listen to folks when they speak up. If a Black athlete says, someone touched my hair, or I don't want to hear erg music that has the N-word in it, listen, because maybe if that doesn't offend you, maybe it offends someone else, and that's something worth being mindful of. And considering that, you know, there are only so many people of color rowers, there are even fewer people of color coaches. And so just because that's not something that affects the coach doesn't mean it greatly affects the athletes. And if we're not, as coaches, creating the environment for our athletes to perform to the best of their abilities, then we're failing. And therefore, we do need to listen. I'm not saying, you know, take requests on lineups. That's not what I'm saying. We're not DJs, you know. I used to say that to the middle schoolers all the time. They'd be like, "Can I be 4 seat today?" I'm like, "What are you kidding?" No. But I think to some extent, as coaches, especially coaches who come from a different background than their rowers, listen and take heed of where this is coming from. And you know, one of the stories of our anonymous episode, what's one thing you want your white coach to know? One of the stories, I'll give a little teaser, is that our someone brought up a story that they heard one of their teammates say the N-word, and it was audible. Everyone on the team heard it, even the coach. And the coach's response to that wasn't addressing it, wasn't bringing it up. All the coach did was just told that student or that youth or that rower to do burpees, and that's it. Just do burpees. Didn't address it. Didn't talk to the black rower and ask, you know, are you okay? Didn't talk to the athletes of, you know, addressing maybe we shouldn't use the N-word at all. And so that's one of the things that's mentioned in our next episode. But given that, you know, just because we're reacting to something, is that enough of a response? You know, what kind of example are we giving to the other rowers who might be coaches in the future, or the other rowers who might hear the N-word as well, and how do they respond to that?
So certainly the burpees were a punishment, but the coach didn't explain the context as to why the punishment had been given, or the fact that it was unacceptable.
Correct. Yeah.
So one of the things that I have observed, particularly in student rowing clubs, is there's a tendency to over-engineer solutions. And I say this advisedly as an older person who's been in lots of different rowing clubs, and trying to find a solution that works for every single situation is you're on a hiding to nowhere, because it's not possible, because new situations will always arise. So one of the things that I've always looked to is transparency as a principle, which allows you then to meet and discuss, certainly in the coach-athlete relationship, but also in the athlete-to-athlete relationship, and the coxswain to crew relationship as well. Because transparency then allows you to appraise the judgment position from other people. And going alongside that, one good principle that I have learned is that you should listen, because it's just possible the other person knows something that you don't. I'm not very good at this, and I'm trying to get better. So what's your future goal for diversity in sport, right across the board? In our sport of rowing?
I think one of the goals that we have, which is a shared goal among I know other prominent people of color within the sport, is to have a Black Olympic rower at the LA Olympics, which is in 2028, I believe, assuming that they still follow the schedule, you know, given everything that's happening. But to have a Black American Olympic rower on American soil has not happened, and the sport has been around forever. And the fact that we've integrated basketball, we've integrated baseball, we've integrated golf, we've integrated tennis, and where is rowing in all of that? And it's not to say the effort hasn't been there, but what can we be doing more of that is being done in other sports, and how can we bridge that gap? I think that's one of our shared goals with other folks. I think ultimately, and I don't know if this will happen in our lifetime or the next, but it would be great for a podcast like this to not have to need to exist. It would be great for the stories of people of color to just exist in your every average boathouse day space, you know, for our teammates, for our fellow coaches, for our boathouse, the people who help, like for everyone to hear the stories and not just blankly stare and walk away or respond with burpees, you know, to hear and respond. And ultimately,
you want the story to be unremarkable, not worthy of comment, because it's normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go. So I have a challenge back to you. Each year I publish a book called Rowing Tales, which is short stories from the world of rowing. And they are written by everyday rowers. They're written by elite rowers and coaches and parents. So I would love for you guys to help me collect some rowing stories. And the stories are usually disaster, triumph, something really weird happened, you'd never believe it. Those kind of themes. Animals, sometimes, you know, the time that a fish jumped into the boat, kind of thing. More than just that. But would you guys like to help me get some stories?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you offline. Let's do it. So I write the book in September for publication just leading up to the Christmas holidays. So they can obviously be Christmas gifts, I hope. But yeah, let's see if we can do something.
Yeah, I think we can. Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting us to that.
Well, this is an open invitation to anyone who's got a story. All you have to do is record it and email me the MP3 file. If you're a writer, you can write it, obviously. But I often find that people telling stories orally, you get a much more authentic sense of what actually happened, because their vocal mannerisms are actually worth reproducing on paper.
Yeah. I think also hearing not just the intonations, but also the pauses and where people slow down and how just there's so much intimacy in just like hearing and listening.
Fantastic. Any final words of advice to anyone listening who might want to shape up their own attitude or heighten the awareness of their colleagues?
I mean, I think the only thing is the biggest lesson I think that we're trying to put out there is just to listen to anyone who's saying they're just not comfortable, that there's something different or wrong in your program. Listen and to sit down and try to understand where they're coming from and why they feel this way before you downplay their feelings. Especially when it's coming from a youth in rowing, they are the generation of rowing. So if they're saying this is something they don't feel comfortable with, there's a big chance that we've been doing something wrong for a long time, and they're the first generation to be like, I have the guts to say something. So just listen and, you know, and just share your stories. If you've gone through something, share the story, because someone is looking for that hope and that faith that the struggles that they're going through at the moment is going to change. And so listen and share.
And how does that listening differ from somebody who's just making excuses, regardless of color? Because we've all been on teams with people who are just whingers. How do you pick the difference as a coach? And you just say, no, harden up, finish the piece, and then we'll talk. Don't give up.
I mean, it also has to do, I think for that question, it would have to do with, if I have an athlete who shows up consistently every day and who's trying, who's putting that extra effort all the time, and they're coming to me and they're like, look, coach, I've shown up X, Y, and Z dates. I've done this workout after this workout, and I still have not been placed in this V1 boat. And I've asked you multiple times, or I've never asked you before, why I've never been in this boat, whatever the situation is going on, like why I have never been placed in the boat, and you can't give them a valid reason why they can't be fit in the boat, and or you've given them a valid reason in the past and they've hit that split, they've hit that wherever that target is that you've asked them to hit, and you still can't give them a valid reason why they can't sit in that boat or they can't do this particular activity or race, whatever the case is, then that's a moment when you need to stop giving excuses and start listening, because that's who it's not saying it because they just feel like saying it because they don't want to work out. They're saying it because they really do see and feel that they don't feel equal on their team and they don't feel accepted on their team. And it's your job to step in and understand what you can do to fix that later on or in that moment.
So transparency again is helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Tara says she can't wait to listen to your next episode of the Anonymous Stories and what things you'd like people to tell their white coach. Now, tell the listeners where they can get a hold of you if they have something that they'd like to contribute or an interviewee to suggest for the Growing of Color website.
Ooh, yes. So our Instagram, you can find us at Rowing in Color. And our Instagram, even though it's a baby Instagram, it's got some good stories. Yes, Patricia. But on the Instagram, we have a link tree that links to how you can be a guest, if you know someone who can be a guest, where you can listen to us on Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, and also a link to where you can send us MP3 recordings. So everything is on the link tree, which is found on our Instagram at Rowing in Color.
That is perfect. Patricia, Denise, it's been delightful hanging out with you today. Thank you both so much for making the time.
Thanks so much, Rebecca.
And to everyone else who's listening, the Rowing Chat is the interview podcast, the anchor podcast in the Rowing Chat network. There are now 7 shows on the network. You can find them all at rowing.chat. You can subscribe in your favorite podcast app. And if you would like to become a podcaster, maybe to do one show or a mini series of shows or something completely new that I haven't thought of, I would love to get new voices onto the Rowing Chat podcast. Get in touch on our website, rowing.chat, or wherever you can find us on the social media, because we're in most places. Till next time, bye-bye.